Welcome to another episode of DLT's ContinuousX podcast, where we attempt to solve for X in the SDLC equation. My name is Rick Stewart, DLT's Chief Software Technologist, and joining me is my co-host and colleague, Mike Fitzurka, Senior Sales Engineer for our Application Lifecycle Technologies. Today's guest is Kevin Greene, Director of Security Solutions at Parasoft. Kevin is a subject matter expert as it relates to secure coding, DevSecOps, and best practices for ensuring high-quality software delivery. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. I appreciate you all having me on. I'm very excited to talk about software security, DevSecOps. Man, I could talk about this stuff for days, so I'm very excited.
Excellent. I love having another coder on board. we interview other people. Someone who's coding. Awesome.
Before we begin, I wanted to allow Kevin the opportunity to relay his interesting background we discussed when we first started working together, and how it not only bolsters his bona fides to today's discussion, but also displays his keen insight to technical solutions. So, Kevin, just a real quick pat on your own back.
I appreciate that. If we go from beginnings, I think I have a very interesting path of doing cyber and being involved in cyber. If you go back to my days at E&Y, I was at E&Y doing pen testing, ethical hacking at the time. This is like early 90s? No. Late 90s, I should say. Late 90s. And at the time at E&Y, we had a host of characters and a really talented group of people there. So you had Stuart McClure was there, who was at Silence. I think they were acquired by, I forgot about who. George Kurtz was there from CrowdStrike. The guys who founded Boundstone was there. So we had a really good mix of talent. And I really enjoyed that experience because it was something where I was able to work with different clients and doing pen testing and helping do vulnerability assessments. So that kind of helped start my career and the passion for cyber and wanted to take it the next level. I'm going to fast forward a little bit to my days at DHS because I think those are the most recent years and I think I'm probably most proud of. Being able to be an employee in the federal government, serve this nation, help lead the charge and provide leadership around software security and software assurance, and really put key initiatives in place to kind of push forward not only the state of practice but the state of the art. There, I was working in the Science and Technology Directorate in the Cybersecurity Division. I ran an R&D program around software assurance. So things come to mind like the Software Assurance Marketplace, aka SWAMP. Hybrid analysis is something that I funded. It was a research project that I funded. I was very proud of. Initially did it as a SIBR. I did, obviously you have your SIBR, your phase 1, your phase 2, you have to down select. I thought this technology was so important. I wanted to hedge my bets and I funded 2 SIBRs, right? And funny thing is, both of the work that came out of the program, hybrid analysis mapping, were commercialized by a company called CodeDX, and the other is called Denim Group. Mm-hmm. They both since have been acquired. CodeDX was acquired by Synopsys, and Denim Group was acquired by Coalfire. So I'm proud of that. Right? Research that I initially initiated. My ideas was, commercialize the transition into, we got over the valley of death, and it's in operational environments. People are using it. So taxpayer dollars are benefiting from that, right? And it increases the adoption, and it gets technology in the hands of folks who need it the most. So my time at DHS was very important in really helping shaping and providing leadership in not only government, but also across industry, and just trying to help people think outside the box about how we should address some of the challenges we see in software security. Some of the language that we see in executive order made its way through S&T and my program and some of the other program managers that was there. We see some of the language there that still remains around how do we improve software security. So that was one of the better parts of my career where I was really enjoying and being in a leadership position. And from there, I went to MITRE. I've worked on several key sponsor organizations helping to formalize DevSecOps. I also worked on an attack project. So I had some really good experience, and I think it's valuable in kind of where we are now as we see the landscape around software security.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know you're far too modest for me to kind of relay that, and so I appreciate you giving me your background, and so that we can set the table for the discussions. And as our viewers know, this forum is Q&A style, but what Kevin doesn't know that each incorrect answer will cost him to have to sit through the women's gymnastics ribbons performance in the Tokyo Olympics. So
what's wrong with the ribbons performance?
Nothing if you like that.
I can multitask, so that's fine.
So you've Kevin, just given him the license to do all wrong answers.
If Kevin accepts the challenge, which I assume you do, I'll start the questioning.
Oh, hardly accept.
Fantastic. With the cultural advancement from DevOps to DevSecOps, our audience is given the directives to shift left their security or even implement a zero-trust architecture. What advice can you provide to improve their development and delivery process to help them meet these goals?
I think shift left, a lot of times people use it as a catchy marketing term. And I think there's some true meaning to it, right? If we think about what it means to build security in and shifting left. But with the recent attacks and things that have been happening, some things I've been thinking about, I'd rather say push left, right? And I think when I say push left, I mean, there's so much things we learn from the right, things that we learn from the operational aspect that never makes its way back to developer. It never makes it back into a developer's daily activities. So they are aware of what could go wrong. They're aware of the consequences of their coding and refactoring activities in creating an attack surface or exposing attack surface or creating bugs that can expose vulnerabilities. So there's things that we can learn, that continuous learning feedback loop where we are doing pen testing on the right side of how we build software delivery process. We're doing pen testing. We're using things like threat modeling and threat intelligence to learn, right, or what could go wrong and really understand how adversaries are trying to attack. And how do we codify that back into design, right? We want to make sure we have a good design. Why? Good design is necessary because we need to build the essential things into software, right? One of the key things that I talk about a lot is building some of these key principles around software minimalism, making sure we're only building software with the essential things that we need, right? Reducing the attack surface, having design where we're reducing the attack surface. We're depreciating APIs and endpoints that we are not using, right? We're enforcing least privilege. All these things are built into the actual design. And then from there, we can then implement design correctly in code by understanding the consequences of the things that could go wrong, right? How adversaries are trying to attack, and having an understanding of the different techniques and tactics that adversaries are using to try to compromise our environments, our software. The SolarWinds really showed us a lot of things, and I think there's things that we can learn from these attacks. If we were able to do tabletop exercises, right, with developers as part of awareness and training for developers, right? I think being defensive minded in terms of how we code and deliver software is important. I always say that secure coding and secure design is our first line of defense, right? And then I think if we take that mentality, that what it really truly means to shift left, right? We're building it in from the onset, right? And it's more than just a catchy phrase. The entire team is thinking about ways in which an adversary can attack and compromise their environment and their software. So I think that's, to me, is shift left. And I think zero architecture is something that plays on that in terms of reducing software minimalism, least privilege, only giving, access to what is needed, and really protecting critical infrastructure and critical resources that we see are so important that adversaries are looking for. They're lurking and trying to find these things on the network and in the software. So I think it's important to leverage not only zero trust, but also the mentality about building it in, which to me really what it truly means to shift left.
I think that poses a challenge in the public sector. And from my standpoint, I agree with 100% of what you said.